Alright, what's up YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be jacking up the car and I'm actually going to be doing the brake flush on my car. So for the 2015 and up WRXs, not sure if the STI is the same, but I think it is. Subaru recommends that you get the brake fluid flushed every 30,000 miles. So my car is actually already at 33. I'm a little overdue. I just, haven't really had time, haven't been home, so I didn't have time to do it. So now that my brother's home for the weekend, I'm gonna have him help me change the brake fluid. It's pretty simple, honestly. It's not that hard. And then I'll show you guys, the step-by-steps of how to do a brake flush, and it should be pretty similar for all other cars. Obviously, this one is going to be specific to the WRX, the 2015 and up. But on all other cars, it's pretty much the same procedure. Okay, so I got the car up on all four sides on jack stands. So now what I'm going to do next is pull the wheels off. Once I pull the wheels off, I'll open the hood and I'll show you guys where the brake reservoir is, because you're going to have to fill that up periodically as you're flushing the brakes. And then I'll show you also where you go to flush the brakes on each side. There's like a little valve that you open up with a wrench. So when you open that valve, when you hit the brakes, that'll push out fluid through that valve. So I have a little bottle and tube that I'm going to be using to collect that fluid, because you don't want that fluid to just go on the floor. And also you want to be careful, you don't want that fluid getting everywhere. It's very caustic, so it will eat away at paint, degrade plastics. It will cause corrosion, so you got to be very careful. If you spill any of the brake fluid, you want to make sure that you wipe it up immediately, because you don't want it to start eating away at stuff. But yeah, all right, let's get these wheels off. Okay, so I have the wheels off currently. So here's the rear wheel. So here you have your brake disc, caliper, and then if you look in the back, you have this little rubber cover. So if you take this cover off, which mine's kind of stuck, but if you take that cover off, you'll see a little valve. That's the valve that you're gonna loosen and open up in order to flush the brake fluid. It's a little tough to get off, but here it is. As you can see, nice and shiny. It looks brand new, that little valve. So make sure you keep these little rubber covers off, because they protect that valve from being corroded. As you can see around it, it's a little rusty. That's normal. But you don't want the valve itself to get rusty, because if this gets rusty, it might start to break apart. You might have little pieces of rusty metal mixing in with your brake line, or with your brake fluid. You really do not want that. So these do their job very well. Here we have the front brake system. So you have your caliper, your rotor, caliper, and then right behind it, I already took the cover off right here, your little valve you're going to be opening to flush the brake fluid. And as you can see, this one looks just as shiny as the one in the back. It looks brand new. The rest of the suspension, it's a little questionable. It's rusty, but the car is 4.5 years old, and up here in New York we have lots of salt and snow, which kind of messes with your suspension parts a lot. But yeah, all right, let me get my bottle, show you guys what I'm be using to collect the fluid, and I'll show you guys where the brake reservoir is in the engine bay. All right guys, so the wrench you're gonna need is a 10 millimeter. So the 10 millimeter fits right around the little valve you're going to be opening up. So make sure you have a 10 millimeter box wrench. Doesn't really matter which side you use. I'll see what's easier, and I'll let you guys know which side is easier and tell you which one to use. The other thing is too, I have here Subaru professional use brake fluid. This is .3 brake fluid, so this is what's recommended from Subaru. So you can just pick it up at your local Subaru dealer. I got two bottles of these. I don't remember how much exactly they cost. I'll go back and look it up. I feel like it could have been maybe $15 each. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to double check. I don't really remember. But either way, you know, they have plenty of these in stock. So, you know, you can go to your local Subaru dealer. And then also here, I think I bought this on Amazon. It's called a brake bleeder bottle. So this is what I'm going to be using to collect the fluid that's coming out of the valve. So let me just show you guys that. The weather was supposed to be sunny today. This doesn't look too promising. Hopefully it doesn't rain, because that would suck. I have no wheels on my car. It is jacked up. All these are outside. First of all, I'd have to roll all of these into my garage really quickly if it does start raining. Let's pray that it doesn't. Also, since we're changing the brake fluid, the last thing I need is water to get inside the brake reservoir. That would absolutely suck. But anyway, let's try to get this done. All right, here's the bottle. This little tube flailing around. So basically what I did is, it comes with a little tube. So you stick this tube in the top. There's a little opening on top. So you stick it through, and you want the tube to go all the way to the bottom. The reason you want this is that when you start taking out some of the fluid, obviously the fluid's gonna start collecting at the bottom and start filling up. You want that tube to be underneath the brake fluid level. So the reason you want the tube all the way to the bottom is that if, while you're bleeding the brakes, let's say, I'm gonna have two people doing this basically. I'm gonna be here loosening the valve, and I'm gonna have my brother inside pushing the brake. So let's say he lets go of the brake too early before I tell him to. You know, the system is gonna wanna, you know, as you pull the brake back, like, you know, back to its normal position, fluid is gonna wanna come back through that line. So if you have your tube submerged in the brake fluid, what's gonna happen is just brake fluid is gonna go back into the lines. If this tube is, you know, like up here somewhere, like above where the brake fluid line is, then it's gonna suck air back in. You do not want air in your brake system. That is not good. You don't want that. So, you know, that's why just make sure your tube is underneath the, you know, it's basically being submerged by brake fluid. And the other thing about this bottle that's nice is that it has a little magnet here. So I can just go here to the caliper, and it just sticks. And this is just like a little hanger you can use to, you know, if you want to attach it to something so that it doesn't fall, so you can have it hanging. Another thing too is when you put the tube on, you want to make sure that the tube, the top of the tube, is above the nipple and basically above the highest point on the brake system. So the highest point of the brake system looks to be about here. So the reason you want this tube to be above that is that if there's any air is going to try to go to the highest position. So if you have it all the way up here, let's say, like, you know, the tube is, you know, really high up, then that means that if there's any air in the system, it's gonna get pushed out of the valve into the tube, and you'll see little like air bubbles being pushed out. That way you have the air getting pushed into this tube instead of being pushed back around your brake system. Okay, enough talking, let's set this thing up. Okay, so I have my little bottle attached. The tube fits right over that little little nipple. If you want, you can get a zip tie and then just tighten this a little bit more. That way it's more secure. But I'm gonna be here like watching it, so, you know, I'll make sure it doesn't come off. As you can see, I have the tube. The tube is the highest point on the brake system right now, so any air bubbles will come out through the tube. Next thing to do is go over here to the brake reservoir. As you can see, just double check your brake fluid level, because as we flush the fluid, you know, that brake fluid is going to go down, down, and down. You do not want to let this run dry, because then that means you're going to be pushing air into your system. So every time you're pumping the brakes and pushing out fluid, come back here, take a look, make sure the level's not too low. If it's too low, fill it up with some of the new brake fluid. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to leave it as is, have my brother, you know, push the brakes a few times just so we can try to flush out as much of that old fluid as possible. Once it gets low and most of the old fluid is gone, I will then pour in the new fluid, and then, you know, continue the process. And as my brother keeps pushing the brake, we will push out all of the old fluid, and then we will only have new fluid. And then at that point, that means that the brake reservoir only has new fluid in it. There's no more old fluid. So when we go to all the other brakes, we're only going to be pushing out the old fluid that's in the brake lines. So it'll be a lot quicker to bleed those brakes. Also, another thing, when you open this up, make sure, you know, see my cap's a little bit dirty. It's not too dirty, but you know, it's a little bit. So make sure you wipe down your cap nicely, because you don't want to open this and then you don't want dirt or contaminants getting in there. You don't want anything getting in with your brake fluid. You only want brake fluid in there. So, you know, just make sure you wipe it down when you open it. And then, of course, make sure no water gets in there. You don't want water in your system either. Alright guys, so I'm just going to explain how it is that I'm actually bleeding the brakes. So I'm outside the car, my brother is inside the car. So the way we do it, or the way I'm doing it, is I open the valve and then my brother pushes down on the brake and holds it. As he's holding it, I close the valve and then he lets go of the brake. And then I open the valve, he pushes it. As he's holding it, I close it, he lets go. And then we repeat that process until all of the old fluid is out and I only see nice clear fluid coming through that tube. And then we do that same procedure for all 4 brakes. Another thing to note with these cars is that when you're bleeding the brakes, make sure that the car is off. If you try bleeding the brakes while the car is on, you could potentially damage the ABS pump. And your ABS light is going to go on. So just make sure the car is off when you're doing this. And you will feel the brake pedal is going to get firmer as you're pushing it down. But you'll notice that whenever the valve is open, you can still push the brake all the way down even though it feels firm. So don't worry about that. Alright, so final brake is done. Just an FYI, the way I did it was I did the furthest brake from the reservoir to the closest. So I did the back passenger side, the back driver side, then the front passenger side, and the front driver side. And as you can see, there is definitely a difference between the old fluid and the new one. See how the old one's like this darkish, brownish, orangish color? And then you can see here, this is fresh fluid. It's nice and like clear, like yellowish. So that's what good fluid looks like. This is what old fluid looks like. So up front, the bottle started to get kind of heavy because of all the fluid. So what I did was I actually used a little hanger that it comes with. So I actually hung it through the spring on the stock suspension. So that's what's hanging. And then that way also I can get my tube, the highest point, to be above the brake line. So you see the brake line right back here. This is the top point of the brake line, and then this is the top of my tube. So yeah, if the magnet doesn't work, let's say when you use the magnet to attach it to the rotor is too low, then you can hang it by the spring, and that's what I did, and that works out just fine. Another thing to remember is make sure to top off your fluid, because obviously we were going down. So I was actually monitoring mine every few pumps. I would come in here and put some of the new fluid. Like I said, make sure it doesn't run dry. And at the same time, do not fill it up all the way to max unless you have brand new brakes. Because the thing is, if you're, like I haven't replaced the brakes on this car yet. So my brake fluid was not at the max line, but it was more like right over here where this like plastic line is sticking out. That my fluid was up to there. I don't want to put it all the way to the max, because the thing is, once I get new rotors and pads, you're gonna have to push in the pistons. So by pushing those pistons back in, you're gonna be pushing the fluid here back up. So if you're at the max line and then you push the pistons back in, this possibly could overflow. So you don't want that to happen. So just make sure you see what the level of the brake fluid is before you start doing the brakes, flushing the brakes. And then just make sure to fill it up to the same level after you're done. Alright, so I'm going to just put everything back together now. I actually had 2 containers. I only used 1 full container. So that is what, 12 fluid ounces? So I used 12 fluid ounces to fully flush the brakes. So yeah, also when you turn the car on, just make sure that the level is not too low. If it is too low, top it off a little bit more. But yeah, I used about 1 container of this to do all 4 brakes.